What happens when the quiet kid refuses to shrink and the school bully finally pushes the wrong one? 16-year-old Malik Jones never raised his voice, never threw a punch. But when a popular senior girl tried to humiliate him in front of the whole cafeteria, 10 seconds changed everything. What followed wasn't a fight, it was a masterclass in control, caught on camera, shared across TikTok, and dissected by millions. This wasn't about revenge, it was about respect. And it started with a single word: no. At Lincoln Ridge High School, lunchtime was a performance, whether anyone admitted it or not. Under flickering ceiling lights and the hum of vending machines, reputations were tested in real time. For 16-year-old Malik Jones, lunch was less about food and more about reading the room, navigating glances, gestures, and the invisible lines drawn between who belonged and who didn't. That Thursday felt ordinary. Warm air drifted through the open windows, sneakers squeaked across tile, and someone's playlist bled from a Bluetooth speaker in the corner. Malik moved with quiet purpose, earbuds tucked away, backpack slung low, a paperback sticking out of his hoodie pocket. He scanned the tables. Most were filled with clusters, athletes, theater kids, TikTok clicks. His usual spot by the east wall was taken. He headed for a quieter bench near the center. That's where he saw it, a designer tote bag, carelessly placed in the middle of the bench like a velvet rope. Across the table sat Sierra Lane, 17, volleyball captain, Instagram verified, always camera ready. He knew her. Everyone did. Not for kindness, not for cruelty either, just presence, the kind that made people move before she asked. Malik approached and asked if she could move the bag. His voice was low but clear. Sierra barely glanced up. Then she smiled, a kind of dismissive, performative smile, and tilted her head. "You want to sit here?" she asked, loud enough for her friends to look over. It wasn't about the bench. It never was. It was about unspoken rules. Who was allowed to take up space? Who was expected to apologize for asking? When Sierra refused to move the bag, Malik didn't argue. He stood still, unreadable. That stillness shifted the tone. The laughter around the table grew forced, louder than it needed to be. Phones began to appear. The cafeteria's rhythm changed. Malik didn't flinch, and that unnerved her. This wasn't about volume or strength. It was a psychological standoff, a challenge to social scripts that said boys like him were supposed to be either invisible or aggressive. But Malik wasn't either. He was controlled, focused, and that alone, his refusal to perform the role others expected, was enough to unbalance the scene. Because sometimes the real confrontation begins before the first word is even spoken. Malik Jones didn't always know how to disappear, but he had learned, not in a self-pitying way, not in fear. It was something closer to adaptation. He had mastered the quiet exits, the lowered gaze that didn't challenge, the ability to observe without drawing attention. In middle school, it had been a defense. By high school, it was a strategy. Malik was 16 now, tall and lean, with a stillness that made people underestimate him. He lived with his aunt and his little cousin in a 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of the city. His mother had passed when he was 9. His father was someone he used to ask about, then stopped. His Aunt Sharon worked double shifts as a city bus driver. She didn't hover, but she paid attention. And one night, when Malik came home with a bloodied lip and nothing to say, she signed him up for self-defense classes the very next day. Not karate, not boxing, Krav Maga. At first, Malik resisted. It felt like overkill, like she was trying to make him into someone he wasn't. But Aunt Sharon didn't argue. She just drove him to the center and told him to give it 6 weeks. 6 weeks became 6 months, then 3 years. The instructors didn't ask many questions. They didn't need to. Malik showed up 3 times a week, every week. He didn't talk much there either. He listened. He practiced. He learned to move without warning, to use his breath like armor, to read a person's weight before they moved. It wasn't about violence, it was about clarity. What made Malik different from most of his peers wasn't strength, it was preparation. By the time he reached junior year, he could tell from someone's posture whether they were looking to intimidate or impress. He knew how to disarm someone twice his size. He knew where his own limits were. He never raised his voice, never flexed for attention, and never mentioned training to anyone at school. That wasn't the point. What he didn't expect was how much his silence made people uncomfortable. In classrooms, teachers often assumed he wasn't engaged. He was. He just preferred listening to talking. In the hallways, some kids saw him as stuck-up or standoffish. Some ignored him altogether. But Malik was always watching. He saw how other students were treated, who got the benefit of the doubt and who didn't. He saw how the staff handled disruptions differently depending on who caused them. A loud joke from one student was just personality. From another, it was defiance. That double standard wasn't new, it was just more obvious now. At Lincoln Ridge, Malik had already seen enough to know the unspoken rules. Girls like Sierra Lane, popular, wealthy, photogenic, were untouchable. They could cut in line, mock classmates, or skirt dress codes without consequences. Teachers called it personality. Administrators called it leadership. Boys like Malik had to be perfect just to be seen as average. The cafeteria incident wasn't Malik's first time being dismissed. It was just the first time someone tried to do it so publicly. Sierra's refusal to move her bag wasn't random. It was the calculated confidence of someone who had never been told no. What she didn't expect, what no one expected, was for Malik to resist without exploding. That's what made it viral. Not just the confrontation, but the way he handled it. The way he stayed planted, calm, unmoved. The shove wasn't caught on the school's security cameras, but at least 6 students had their phones out when it happened. 10 seconds. That's all it took. And when Malik didn't react the way people expected, didn't push back or yell or swing, it flipped the narrative. He didn't escalate, he redirected. That restraint, that control, hit the internet differently, especially in a time when school violence clips usually go viral for all the wrong reasons. Malik's video was different. It wasn't spectacle, it was strategy, and people couldn't stop watching. Some clips racked up hundreds of thousands of views within 24 hours. One video was slowed down with annotations explaining every movement, how Malik turned his shoulder, stepped forward instead of back, and shifted Sierra off balance without ever tightening a fist. TikTok flooded with reactions, reenactments, breakdowns. The most shared clip was paired with a trending beat and the caption, "When the quiet kid knows something you don't." But virality is a double-edged sword. By the next day, students stared at Malik like he was a myth. Some with awe, some with suspicion. Teachers didn't know whether to praise his composure or discipline his physical response. And Malik, he just wanted to sit down and finish his book. Because in his mind, he hadn't won anything. He had just done what needed to be done. That's the part nobody seemed to understand. The cafeteria had gone quieter than it ever should have at lunch. It started with a pause, longer than normal, heavy enough to feel. Malik stood by the bench, unmoved, unbothered. Sierra's friends were still chuckling, but it had turned nervous, like they weren't sure what joke they were supposed to be laughing at anymore. Sierra sat with her phone in hand, thumbs idle, staring like she couldn't believe he hadn't walked away. The thing about people like Sierra, those who learned early that charisma could smooth over cruelty, is they weren't used to resistance, especially not the kind that didn't fight back. Malik hadn't raised his voice, he hadn't stepped forward, he hadn't flinched. And that stillness, it made her feel smaller. She stood up, not dramatically, not with a stomp, just enough to shift the dynamic, enough to signal that this wasn't done. Her voice, when she spoke again, was louder, clearer, calculated. "You trying to prove something?" she asked. Malik looked at her, not defiant, not afraid, just there. "I asked you not to block the seat." A few people turned their heads. A freshman dropped his fork. Another kid angled his phone like it was nothing, just casual filming, except now 5 or 6 students were doing the same. Sierra's smile vanished. Her hand dropped to her hip. "You got the whole cafeteria," she snapped, "and you want this spot? What is this? Some kind of stunt?" Malik didn't answer. He picked up his book off the table, carefully, like he wasn't going to let it get caught in whatever storm was coming. Then he said, calm as a closing door, "I'm not moving." There it was, the moment. Something shifted in Sierra. Something beneath the surface cracked. Maybe it was embarrassment. Maybe it was the spotlight. Maybe it was that nothing she did seemed to get the reaction she expected. But what came next didn't feel calculated. It felt desperate. She shoved him, open-handed, shoulder level, not enough to knock him over, but enough to get a gasp. Enough to make sure everyone watching had no doubt this had crossed the line. And that's when everything slowed. Phones up, voices silenced, eyes frozen. The shove, however slight, set a line in motion Malik had spent years preparing for. Not to win, not to punish, but to protect. He didn't raise his arms. He didn't step back. He pivoted, first the back foot, then the angle of his body. He let the pressure of her push roll past him, like water sliding off stone. His right hand caught her wrist, not hard, just enough to redirect the force. His left hand pressed gently, precisely, at the inside of her elbow. And then, in one controlled pivot, Sierra lost her balance. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't violent. Her feet simply left the floor. Her weight moved forward while Malik's shifted back. Her momentum did the rest. A second later, she landed on the polished tile. Her hands broke her fall. Her pride did not. No punches, no yelling, no chaos. Just one clean movement and an awkward landing. 10 seconds, maybe less. Half the room gasped. The other half didn't know how to breathe. One of Sierra's friends stood up. Malik had already stepped back. Palms down, posture relaxed. No tension in his body. No aggression in his stance. He hadn't fought. He had responded. That distinction was everything. What no one saw coming was what Malik said next. It wasn't an insult. It wasn't a clapback. It was quieter than that. "You done?" Sierra blinked, still on the floor. A few kids laughed, nervously, awkwardly. The tension cracked. She scrambled to her feet, face flushed. She looked around and realized she wasn't just embarrassed. She was exposed because nobody was rushing to her side, and every camera was still rolling. She stared at Malik like she wanted to say something, wanted to make it his fault. But nothing came out. She grabbed her bag, muttered something under her breath, and pushed past the crowd that had formed. She didn't even look back. Malik sat down, not at a different table, not in the corner, right where he'd planned to sit before any of this happened. He opened his book, thumbed to the page, and began to read, like the room wasn't still spinning around him. By the end of the lunch period, the footage had made its way to 4 group chats, 3 Discord servers, and TikTok. The most shared version was cut to 10 seconds, zoomed in, slowed down, with text overlay that read, "Bro didn't fight, he just flowed." By the end of the school day, it had 40,000 views. The virality wasn't just about the fall, it was about the silence, about the way Malik didn't react the way people expected. His calm had more impact than a punch ever could. Online, that clip sparked debates. Was this self-defense? Was it too far? Should he have just walked away? What made the clip powerful was its ambiguity. It wasn't a fistfight. It wasn't a meltdown. It was a moment of control. A boy who refused to be cornered. a confrontation that didn't escalate, but flipped the script. In classrooms, teachers whispered about the video. In the front office, staff scrambled to figure out what had happened before it landed in the district's inbox. And Sierra? She didn't show up for sixth period. Rumor had it she went home early. Nobody confirmed it, but no one doubted it either. By the next morning, Malik had gone from background figure to local legend. Some students avoided eye contact, others gave him nods of respect. One kid whispered, "Teach me that move," as he walked by. But Malik didn't smile, didn't gloat. He'd been in that moment before, maybe not in a cafeteria, maybe not on camera, but he'd faced pressure. He knew how fast things could go from bad to worse. What no one could see in the video, what they couldn't edit into a meme, was the years it took to be that calm. The training, the discipline, the thousands of little choices that taught him to hold his ground without blowing it up. In those 10 seconds, Malik didn't just defend himself. He revealed everything the room didn't want to admit. That sometimes silence is stronger than shouting. That control is louder than violence. That strength has nothing to do with making someone fall, and everything to do with refusing to be pushed down. Malik didn't go viral the way some people dream of it. By the end of sixth period, the video of his calm redirection had hit over 100,000 views. The comments poured in fast, some praising him as a legend, others arguing over whether it was self-defense or a power move. But inside Lincoln Ridge High, the mood was more complicated. It wasn't just about a video anymore. It was about control, race, silence, and how one student's refusal to react the right way forced everyone else to see things they'd ignored. The assistant principal, Ms. Ellison, called Malik down just before dismissal. Her office smelled like old printer toner and stale coffee. She didn't look angry. She looked confused, uncomfortable, like someone who had just realized they weren't equipped for what was happening in their own building. Sierra was already seated when Malik walked in. She didn't look at him. Her hair was tied back now, her expression blank. Malik sat down one chair apart. The tension wasn't just thick, it was institutional. Ms. Ellison folded her hands. "So, someone want to explain what happened today?" Sierra jumped in first. Her voice was polished, prepped, like she'd rehearsed it in the hallway. "He grabbed me. I was walking away and he grabbed me, threw me down." Malik didn't interrupt. He just looked at her, calm. Then he turned to Ms. Ellison. "She pushed me, twice." "And then what?" "I redirected her balance. She fell." "You mean you tripped her?" "Number Y moved so she wouldn't keep pushing me. I didn't hurt her. I didn't throw her. I just got out of the way." Ms. Ellison exhaled slowly. "Well, I'll need to review the footage, and I'll be calling both of your families, but I can already tell this is different." She paused, looking back and forth between them. This could have gone so much worse. By that evening, Malik's aunt, Sharon, had already seen the video. It was on her phone before he even made it home. She didn't yell, didn't panic. She asked one question. "You okay?" Malik nodded. That was all she needed. He spent the night quiet, scrolling. The internet was spinning faster than he could track. TikTok was flooded with breakdowns. YouTube had reaction videos from creators with millions of followers. On Twitter, someone posted a slowed-down version with commentary, "Notice how he never clenches his fists. That's control. That's power." But Malik didn't care about views. He cared about school the next day. Friday morning, the hallways at Lincoln Ridge felt different, not tense, not hostile, just watchful, like everyone was waiting to see what Malik would do next. Some students gave him wide space as if he might snap. Others approached with admiration. "That was sick, man," one kid said, fist-bumping him in homeroom. "I didn't mean for it to go that far," Malik replied. "That's what makes it even colder." He didn't smile, He just sat down and took out his notebook. In third period, Ms. Daniels, his English teacher, paused at his desk after class. "You doing all right?" He nodded. "You know, a lot of students, they react." You responded. Malik didn't know what to say to that. At lunch, Sierra didn't show up. Rumors swirled. She'd transferred out. She'd gone to a private counselor. Her parents were threatening legal action. None of it confirmed, but Malik could feel the undercurrent. The same people who once called him invisible were now treating him like a storm cloud, either in awe or waiting for thunder. The school administration was scrambling, not to support Malik, not entirely, but to manage the optics. Ms. Ellison called another meeting, this time with a district counselor present. They asked Malik how he felt, if he felt safe, if he needed space. But none of them asked about how long Sierra's behavior had gone unchecked. None of them acknowledged how many times Malik had been expected to ignore, absorb, and stay quiet. The school didn't have a restorative justice process in place. No formal way to bring students together to talk through harm. Just a long list of zero-tolerance rules that didn't quite know what to do with nuance. So they split Malik and Sierra's schedules, changed his lunch period, asked him to keep things calm. He had been calm the entire time. The internet, meanwhile, didn't care about policy. It cared about the moment. Memes flooded Instagram. The quiet kid strikes back. TikTok duets featured martial arts commentary. Even a few self-defense instructors posted breakdowns of Malik's form, praising his posture, his choice not to escalate. But others raised flags. Some commentators pointed out that if Malik hadn't been so composed, if he had pushed back with anger instead of precision, he likely would have faced suspension or worse. "Let's be clear," one black creator said in a now viral video. He didn't go viral because he won. He went viral because he survived doing everything right. It was a sentiment echoed again and again. People celebrated Malik, yes, but they also knew what his story revealed, that some students only get to protect themselves if they do it perfectly silently without cracking the image of control. And even then, it's a gamble. That weekend, Malik barely left his room, not because he was hiding, but because he knew the world had already seen enough of him. By Monday, Sierra returned. She didn't say a word to him, didn't look his way. She walked the halls like she always had, except something was missing, the casual entitlement, the unchallenged air of authority. The shine had dulled. Malik didn't gloat. He didn't stare her down. He just kept walking, because for him it was never about revenge. It was about respect, about knowing that you didn't have to scream to be heard. You just had to stand your ground and mean it. And sometimes that was enough to shake the whole system. The apology didn't come with an announcement. There was no viral clip this time. No crowd, no phones, no pressure to perform. It happened quietly, after school, near the back gate where the buses lined up. Malik had stayed late to make up a chemistry quiz. The sky had softened into the muted orange of early spring, and the students who lingered were the kind who kept to themselves. Malik liked it that way. He had just slipped in his earbuds when he saw her. Sierra, standing by the chain-link fence, arms crossed, book bag pulled tight against her shoulder. She wasn't dressed like she normally was. No glitter liner, no carefully curated jacket, just jeans, a hoodie, and an expression that didn't look like hers. Malik paused, not out of fear, just surprise. She raised a hand slightly, not quite a wave. "I'm not here to start anything," she said, voice low. He didn't move. "I didn't know how else to say something," she added. Malik took one earbud out. "You don't have to say anything." "Yeah, I do," she said, because I messed up, and not just with what I did." She looked away for a second. "I let people gas me up. I thought pushing you was going to make me look tough, like standing up to you was some kind of flex. but all it did was show everybody what I really am." He didn't respond right away. She looked up again. "You could have hurt me." "I didn't want to," Malik said. "I just wanted you to stop." "I know." Sierra shifted uncomfortably. "The videos, the comments, the way people talk now, it's been brutal. But the part that messed with me the most wasn't the fall. It was the way you stayed in control." Malik didn't gloat, didn't smirk. "I've had to handle a lot," he said quietly. "People don't always expect you to know how." Sierra nodded. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted to say I was wrong. You didn't deserve that." For the first time, Malik saw something in her eyes that didn't look like pride. It looked like someone realizing they were never really as untouchable as they believed. He nodded once. "Thank you for saying that." And that was it. She turned and walked away. No dramatic exit, no final word. Just a girl who finally understood the weight of silence. The next morning, the hallways still buzzed, but something had shifted. Sierra walked with less noise, fewer side glances. She wasn't erased, just humanized. Students still noticed her, but now they noticed Malik too. Not with fear, not even always with admiration, with curiosity, with care. In the cafeteria, Malik sat with his usual crew, just a couple of classmates who minded their business and left space when needed. He didn't bring up the apology. He didn't need to. But the video was still circulating. By now, people had begun posting think pieces, short essays, commentary clips, even a few podcasts dissecting what had happened. The incident had become a kind of case study, not just about school bullying or teen conflict, but about image, impulse, and what happens when real-life tension plays out in public view. One popular breakdown video said it best. This wasn't a fight. This was a refusal to be dominated. And what made it powerful was that it wasn't loud. It was precise. It was practiced. It was earned. Teachers started bringing it up in class, not directly, but through lesson plans. One English class discussed the concept of restraint as power, using literary examples but clearly pointing toward what had happened just days earlier. And slowly the conversation began to evolve. Some students wanted Sierra punished. Others said she'd already paid enough socially. Most didn't know how to feel, but what stuck, the thing that wouldn't fade, was that Malik had stayed grounded. He hadn't cracked under pressure. He hadn't let the moment make him into something he wasn't. Even Ms. Ellison changed her tone. The following week, she met with Malik and his aunt. This time, she didn't talk about conflict avoidance. She talked about leadership. "You showed us something," she said. "Something we weren't expecting to learn from a student." Sharon, sitting beside her nephew, gave him a side glance that only he noticed. She didn't need to say anything. She'd known all along the apology wasn't the end, but it was a hinge. It didn't undo what happened. It didn't erase how long Sierra had gotten away with things or how often Malik had been overlooked, but it made space, not for friendship, not even for closure, just for truth. And sometimes, in a world that's too quick to perform and too slow to reflect, that's more than enough. That night, Malik sat at the kitchen table helping his aunt fold laundry. No one mentioned the video, no one brought up school. The TV hummed softly in the background, and the dryer buzzed behind them. Life, for a moment, was ordinary. "You good?" Sharon asked, glancing at him over a stack of towels. "Yeah," Malik said, and he meant it. Because despite everything, despite the whispers, the posts, the awkward stares, he had held on to something more important than pride. He had held on to himself. The whole world had seen 10 seconds, but they hadn't seen the years it took to respond with that much control. They hadn't seen the nights he spent on the mat, training after homework, the days he stayed quiet in class while others filled the space with noise. They hadn't seen how many times he had to learn that people would call him aggressive just for setting a boundary, but he had learned. And when it mattered, he didn't swing, he didn't shout, he moved. That's what power looked like. Not the kind that comes with volume or followers, not the kind that wins fights, the kind that stays grounded when someone tries to knock you off balance, the kind that doesn't need an audience. The internet called him a hero, but Malik didn't feel like one. He didn't want to be the center of a viral moment. He just wanted to be respected, to be left alone when he asked, to be seen for who he was. Not the stereotype, not the silent threat, just a boy who knew his worth. At school, things slowly returned to normal, but something subtle had shifted. Teachers called on him more often. Students who used to overlook him now greeted him by name. And Sierra, she still avoided eye contact, but she also never tried to own a table with a bag again. Malik knew this wasn't the end of the conversation. The pressure to stay calm, to handle things the right way, would always be heavier on him than others. But he had proven something, if not to them, then to himself, that he didn't have to raise his voice to be heard, that you don't need to fight to take a stand, and that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stay standing when the world expects you to fall.